Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So let's address the elephant in the room. So we talked about the crew neck,
Right.
but we also developed the piece, the anti-PWI piece.
Right. Right.
And so tell me about what was the inspiration. I mean, I was in the meeting when
Right,
the inspiration
yeah.
struck, but I know that you had firsthand experience with it just like I did, but you were even more firsthand than I was.
Yeah. So, the idea itself came from, and this actually kind of picks up on the socks that we have, right? So, the mascot, clearly, as you know, it has always been the underdog, right?
Yeah.
So, the idea of this figure that is constantly progressing and working through his trials and his tribulations and is experiencing success, but obviously, like, that success isn't coming without any wounds, without any scars, right? And I think that when you start taking a look at the heart of the brand, and as we consistently pushing the line on the process of excellence, right, and this idea of consistently looking to achieve new goals, you're gonna end up getting some scars along the way. You're gonna make some mistakes, right? So the underdog, which is what we have on the socks for all over print, we were talking about that in the meeting, and we saw that there was a connection. That obviously, like this bulldog, there's some resemblance to like the UGA underdog. Now we know that the UGA is a predominantly white institution, right? And so, as we were just looking at the general idea of the type of students that go there and what that makeup looks like of that demographic, we know that as a brand, that's not what we represent. So as we were just kind of like, tossing ideas back and forth, I mentioned like, oh, it's like we're anti-PWI, and you don't like many of my ideas, but that one, it hit, like I remember it hit you, it hit Alex, like it all was like, oh, like that, there's something for us to explore there. And so, functionally, that's how the idea came about for the piece. As far as like having my mind wrapped around like what does PWI mean, as far as predominantly white institutions or predominantly white industries, that's obviously a term that us being from HBCUs, you going to Alabama A&M, me going to the unsinkable Albany State University.
Yeah.
Do
y'all still exist?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Don't get cute. But going to Albany State University, most people may be familiar with Albany, Georgia because of Dr. King and the marches that he led down there. I had never been there prior to me actually going to school. So, long story short, when I finally decided to go to Albany State, this was like 2 weeks before I graduated. So, Darnell, he took me down there for a summer session that I had to complete. And while I'm driving down there, like there's this long highway, I think it's like Highway 300 or 400. It's about 45-minute stretch. Okay. For half of that time, it's on one side of the highway is nothing but cotton fields. And this was my first time actually seeing being in the deep South and seeing all this cotton.
Yeah.
On the other side of the highway, you see these trees that are like in these very individual rows, right? And then you start to see these massive houses. Now for me, coming to find out, these were old plantation homes. And those trees were in a row because if a slave tried to escape from the land, there was a clear shot for the slave owners to be able to shoot the runaway slave. And going through my African diaspora course, which every student who goes to HBCU has to take, you start to see, and again, just being in the deep South and having those visuals right there, you start to see like, man, like this country was built on the backs of people who to this day are still fighting to get recognition for it. I think even with the fact of us being in fashion and most of our products are cotton based, again, like just my mind flashing back, to those cotton fields. It's like, our ancestors may not necessarily been in that field, but that is a symbol of the plight that we've all experienced.
Absolutely.
And so to say that, we're anti predominantly white institutions or anti predominantly white industries, that's only to say that there are these structures that exist in America that don't have, there's no thought of considering us in that progress or that success. In fact, what the idea is, like, let us take as much as we can and keep as many of you guys out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean, and when you take a look at a lot of the industries in America, like that reality is there, and that's why even right now you see such an uprising.
Yeah.
You know, with even things like Black Lives Matter, Me Too movements, all these things are a response to this type of whiteness and institutional systemic oppression and evils that we're just like, we're not here for that.
Absolutely.
You know, and I know for me, you know, I went to a HBCU, and then I got my master's in theology at a PWI, right? So and that even kind of took it to another level for me, because seeing how Christianity has been whitewashed, seeing how there's these professors who speak with a very clear undertone of whiteness and privilege, even as it pertains to how we got our faith. Yeah. And I mean, I've told you how many times I've sat there and debated with both classmates as well as my professors and the dean, just on this very potentially unintentional, narrow-minded, and whitewashed perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so again, this isn't to say that we hate, you know, white people. Like, that's obviously, you know, not at all the kind of time we're on. But what it is to say is that this institution, this thing that has been established, like, we're super straight on that.
Yeah, and I think that needs to be made clear, is that any person of color, any woman, any person of color that steps foot on UGA campus, you're anti-PWI just within that sense of, as soon as you step foot on campus to say, I'm not going for this, or even in the University of Alabama, where the governor, George Wallace, stood on the steps and said, I ain't letting no niggas in my school. Every black person that came to that school is anti-PWI, just as much as anyone that went to Alabama State or Alabama A&M. Like, we're all, Miles College, like, we're all in the same fight for equality. And I think that a lot of times, like, we can start to make factions and dissension within the black community, and it's like, no, we're all headed to the same goal. Yeah, man. Even though we may have different routes to get there, we're all going in that same direction. And I had it's so crazy, because like my childhood was pretty similar to what you experienced in seminary, just being told that this is the way that we were introduced to religion, and even hearing things that Abraham Lincoln was this great man that freed slaves because he had just a compassionate heart, and just like, these things don't compute, these things don't match up to what I'm learning at home. Right. You know what I'm saying? To be able to have that conversation and debate with teachers and fellow students growing up, to say, like, how is it that Jesus is literally pale, but then in the Bible it says he has skin like bronze, you know?
Like, you gotta start asking some questions, like, if we're so big on history, if we're so bent on wanting to be accurate, why is it that these things don't reflect, like, what's true?
Absolutely.
Right, so even, when I kind of even going back to the idea of fashion, like, you have these brands that are very quick to put a black face, for marketing purposes. Right. But when you start looking at the infrastructure of those companies, like, there are no people in actual leadership. Yeah. There's no African Americans or people of color who are, and I'm saying given the opportunity, not in some charity case, but like, I'm talented, I'm gifted as well. You know what I'm saying? And I have the capacity to contribute in amazing ways.
Fam, a very simple example. Last night, I'm doing my daughter's hair, watching Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a scene where one of the main characters goes into like this break room for all the Disney princesses. Yeah. They all got on their dresses, their traditional stuff that you have seen, like Cinderella, Snow White in. And so they were like, oh, I wish I could dress down like you. And we only have one black princess, which is Tiana from Princess and the Frog. Literally in the next scene, everybody is dressed down and Tiana's hair is natural. Like, it's just in her natural curl pattern. And I was like, and I'm like, like, a black person was in that decision-making process. You know what I mean? Of like, this is what dressed down, this is what chill looks like for me. This is the story in which affects me. This is like, and I think that a white person can tell a black story or a man can tell a woman's story to a degree, but let these people tell their own narrative, and I think that that's what's so important when we say anti-PWI. Where, of course, like we have already said, and I even find it ridiculous that we have to keep reiterating that we're not anti-white people or anything like that, but what we are saying is that we are anti-whiteness. That instead of multiculturalism, we're taught multicolored, but act my way.
And see, for me, you know, I think that there's a number of ways to communicate certain truths. I think that there is a time and place for a more diplomatic response, right? Or more, dare I say, culturally sensitive way of presenting things. And I also think that there's always an opportunity in the spaces that say, yo, F the police. You know what I'm saying? There is a proper context to say, fight the power. There is a, you know, a context in which being politically correct, you know, just isn't going to move the needle. And for me, you know, I would also say for the brand, you know, we're just not the kind of guys who, I don't want to even say go along, you know, play along to get along or whatever the phrase is, but you know, like, hey, this is a fact. Yeah. Right. This is a reality that this thing exists. You Absolutely. Know, let's have a conversation about it. Like, let's have dialogue about it. Like every time, you know, I go to a textile show to source fabric, the fact that, you know, there's not many of us that are represented in that room, both on people who are going to source fabric as well as people who are actually, you know, producing that fabric, right? And so it's interesting, like even like stepping into some of those booths, and you know how someone's energy could suggest like, yo, what are you doing here? Yeah. And then in some cases, people actually ask me like, yo, like who are you here to represent? Yeah. You know, and almost like this hurry up and buy kind of mentality, right? And it's like, I know that they're not saying that to my white counterparts, you know, who are there, or my Middle Eastern counterparts that are here. And it's almost as if like it's unbelievable that an African American man can be here on his own accord, you know, running a business that he owns and financing it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So yeah, you know, it's a very large conversation, but you know all of that is what went into, you know, why this particular piece was so important. No. You know, and I think even too, as I'm thinking back to the origins of the brand, the first tee that we did was this joint that said 9 to 5s are for those afraid to fly. It's not to suggest that, yo, if you have a job, that is a bad thing. Yeah. Right. What it is to suggest that is that if your focus is just to be comfortable and to maintain the status quo, hey man, that's cool for you, but I believe that the Lord has a whole lot more for us. There's a whole lot more that we want to experience. Even if that thing isn't, you know, bringing you any monetary value, have something that you're going after. Have something that you're pursuing. Yeah. Have something